Hello and good morning. Good morning, everybody. Hello. Happy Friday. It's Friday morning. I'm drinking coffee. Weather's not great, but that's okay. We love the weather. This sign's a little hot in the camera. Look. And it shows up as backwards. So the camera's always reversed, right? So it actually says stay golden. You can read it backwards. Kind of like that. Kind of like that message. Stay golden. This morning we're talking about shamanism. Specifically, we're talking about shamanic journeying. We're going to talk about what shamanic journeying is, different types of journeys, all of that stuff. It's been a while since I've talked about shamanism live. Good morning. Always the first one. We're talking about shamanic journeying, pathways to other realms today. How can we experience other worlds, other realms, we call them worlds in shamanism. At least in my school of shamanism, we call them worlds. And I'll talk about the different shamanic worlds. I'm going to talk about helping spirits, what those are. Some people might use the term spirit guides. We tend to use the word helping, the phrase, I guess, the term helping spirits. But let's get into it. Let's talk about shamanic journeying. And I'll begin by just quickly. So defining what shamanism is, because there may be some confusion about that, and different people may define it differently, and that's okay. That's fine. It's a tough word to actually put academics argue over what is shamanism, what's shamanic, what is shamanistic. Good morning. Lovely to see you this morning on this Friday morning. It's a little gloomy here, but that's okay. My sign says stay golden. I'm going to stay golden. I realize like my skin looks better on my phone camera than it does on my computer camera. It must be a filter or something on TikTok. Makes me look like I don't need a shave for one. They've perfectly. Oh, I'm happy that you could come in live too as well. Welcome everybody. Talking about shamanism and the shamanic journeying specifically. So, when I talk about shamanism, what is it that I'm talking about? What is it that I'm talking about? It may be different than what other people are talking about, and academics will. Oh my gosh! Happy birthday! Happy your birthday happens to be on Easter this year. So happy birthday. And I guess that makes today Good Friday. I used to always know when Good Friday was, because I worked for ages ago, I worked for an investment firm, and the stock market used to be closed on Good Friday. And so I would have, whenever the stock market was closed, I had the day off. So it used to be a holiday that I had off that hardly anybody else had off. And I enjoyed that. So it's Holy Week, it's Good Friday. If you're Christian, if you're not I guess Orthodox Christianity, you would that comes at a different time. But regardless, we're talking about shamanism. So what do I mean when I talk about shamanism? And academics will argue about it, and people who practice shamanism, and some people will say you're only practicing shamanism if you are Siberian. Not true. Not true to me anyway. So shamanism, I describe it in three ways. One, it is a set of spiritual techniques that are ancient and universal, meaning they were practiced by practically every culture all around the globe. They go back, they're prehistoric. There was shamanic practice well before we had any written records of anything. It would have been called different things, and is today in different languages that from different shamanic cultures. There are, there are words for shaman in Spanish from, South and Central America. There are words for shaman in many different African languages and Asian languages and Native American languages. Um, but in English, we use the word shaman, and people have said, oh, the word shaman has only been around in English usage for the past 20 or 30 years. No, the word shaman has been used in English, has first appeared in writing in English 325 years ago in the late 1600s. So no, it is a what we call a loan word or a borrowed word because it came from another language, came into English from Russian and German actually, but it's a borrowed word. But so is 80% of the English language. 80% of what we say in English does not have origins in like Anglo-Saxon Germanic roots. There's a lot of English that comes from French and Spanish, and there are even like a couple of Basque words in English and Tagalog. There's boondocks. Talk about the boondocks, right? Boondok is Tagalog for mountain. So cheers to the language that we speak. That is a variety of things. So talk about a few things. So it's an ancient set of spiritual practices. It goes back into prehistory. It is practiced by people all over the world and has been since before we had written language. We think it may be as old as 100,000 years based on cave paintings, or maybe even older than that, right? There's some evidence in Israel from 300,000, from a cave in Israel from 300,000 years ago that are, archaeologists are like, this is evidence of shamanic practice. I'm not an archaeologist, so I don't know, but very, very old, maybe going back to the roots of humanity. So spiritual techniques, the main spiritual technique, and we're going to talk about that today, is journeying. That is what, if you're not journeying, are you doing shamanism? Maybe, but you could be doing something else, right? So shamans pray and do ritual and dance and sing and all of those things. But what sets them apart from other spiritual people, practitioners that do just those things, is the shamanic journeying that I'm going to get into today. That's one way of thinking about shamanism. So shamanism, to me, also encompasses a world view, or cosmology. So shamanism is animistic. It comes out of animism. Animism is the belief in spirits, that spirits aren't just in things that we think of as animate, but in my view, everything is a spirit. Some things have physical. This coffee cup and the coffee in it is a spirit. I'm drinking the spirit of coffee, right? So everything is spiritual, as opposed to some belief systems that may say like only humans have souls, right? That there are some people that believe that. That's not a very shamanic perspective. And you can think about animism from different cultures that have animism, where they have sacred mountains that they pray to, or sacred waterfalls, or sacred stones, or what have you. These sacred things that are spirits that they communicate with, they pray to, they do rituals for or around, that sort of thing. So there's that. So there's this worldview, is animistic, and there's the idea that everything is connected to everything. So underneath it all, there is, we're connected to nature, we're connected to each other, we're connected to the universe, we're connected to the stars and the planets and all of that sort of thing. So that's sort of the shamanic viewpoint of reality and the world. And thirdly, I like to say that there is also a shamanic impulse. This is an archetypal impulse. And by archetypal, I mean everybody has this impulse in some way. Not necessarily to become a shaman or practice shamanism, but the shamanic impulse is to awaken spiritually as the result of crisis, some kind of crisis. Could be a personal crisis, a tribal crisis, a family group crisis, a global crisis. During the pandemic, for example, millions of people died in the world, and lots of people turned to spirituality. They felt a call to awaken spiritually. In many shamanic cultures, which are, cultures that have shamanism as part of it, you have to go through some sort of ordeal or crisis to be selected to train as a shaman. So something to consider there. For example, in some cultures, you have to be struck by lightning to be considered a shaman. Not a path I recommend. Don't go out and try to get struck by lightning. But there are cultures where initiation ceremonies are brutal, physically, psychologically. They're meant to bring you to the brink of death and rebirth. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about shamanism. So let's get into journeying, which is the main practice of shamanism. Shamanic journeying is a unique practice. And by that, I mean, it's not the same thing if you're like, well, I meditate. It's not the same thing. I'll tell you why in a moment. Or I practice astral projection. There may be some similarities there, but they're not the same. So shamanic journeying has three main components to the practice of shamanic journeying. First is an altered state of consciousness. This is incredibly important. Okay, so somebody practicing shamanism will we have what we consider our everyday ordinary state of consciousness. Although the truth of the matter is, we have rhythms to our consciousness. You might find yourself daydreaming. You might find yourself in a road trance if you're driving. If you've ever driven somewhere and then don't remember all the drive getting there, and you're like suddenly, oh, how did I get here? But I got here okay. You may have been in a road trance. These are altered states of consciousness. Or just a different state of consciousness. Going into sleep and coming out of sleep. We could argue whether or not sleep is actually an altered state. It's pretty normal. We all sleep. But there's a period of time right before you sleep called the hypnagogic state, and right when you wake up called the hypnopompic state. You may have had like waking dreams when you're just about to fall asleep. You hear something, or you feel like you've been shaken, or when you're first waking up and you're still a little sleepy and some dream material comes through. Those are altered states, meaning they're different than our normal the state of consciousness that we spend most of our time is. But the truth is, our consciousness is not like this. We're not at one level of consciousness all the time. In fact, probably, if you've been watching this for a few minutes, your state of consciousness has changed at least slightly, right? When we become hyper-focused on something, very often, you're reading a book, you're binge watching TV shows, right? You sit there and you're like, oh, 6 hours have passed and I didn't get off the couch. And what happened? We get really engrossed and focused on something. That can be an altered state. The shamanic state of consciousness is unique. We know this now because there's a lot of brainwave research coming out on people practicing shamanism. This book, this is called Soul Matters by Jean-Rachel Solomon, PhD. This was actually her, she was a cohort of my teacher, and I'll just show you some charts in there. They're doing like EEG research on shamans and stuff. Fantastic stuff. This was actually taken from her dissertation. I mean, obviously it's not just her straight up dissertation. They've, made it into a book, but lots and lots of research. So the shamanic state of consciousness, the altered state that shamans go into, is unique. It is not meditation. It is not hypnosis. It's not the same thing as going to sleep or whatever. It is a unique brainwave pattern that has been shown with studies of up to 500 practitioners. And the closest thing they can, they're looking at activity in various locations in the brain. The closest thing is with a journey is taking psilocybin or magic mushrooms, right? That's the closest brainwave state, but it's still unique from that. So, so shamans, they go into an altered state of consciousness. The next component of a shamanic journey is that shamans travel in spiritual realms and other worlds, right? We call that non-ordinary reality, or NOR, or some people call it that. Lots of names for it in different cultures. The other world, the lower world, the upper world. There are different worlds that shamans travel to in journey. So that's why it's called a journey. You're going somewhere in spirit form. A conventional spiritual explanation for that is your part of your consciousness is separating from your body and is able to travel in spirit form to other realms. The third component, I'm going to talk about the shamanic realms in a moment, but I want to get through this first. The third component to a shamanic journey is that shamans always work with helping spirits. So one does not journey just to journey. Good morning. My coffee does taste amazing this morning. I did a good job again today making my coffee. But thank you very much. And it's Friday. Who can complain? I read something. There was something this morning that came up on Facebook, I think, and it said like, drinking coffee is feminine. It's one of these like real manly men. You shouldn't drink coffee. But then, other people are real men drink black coffee and blah, blah, blah. There's so much. Someday I'm going to compile a list of stuff that people write on the internet that men are allowed to do. It's a very small list. We're not allowed to drink coffee, apparently, or shave. We're supposed to have a beard. I forget what else. Not supposed to have lots of emotions. There's a big long list of stuff people post all the time. It's just throw stuff out there. Real men shouldn't drink coffee. Well, okay, whatever. I'm gonna have my coffee. I love my coffee. It's a tool for higher consciousness. Okay, so we have the three components of shamanic journey. So shamans work with helping spirits. In general, in most shamanic cultures and most people who practice, you get to know certain spirits that you work with all the time. These spirits include power animals. Some people refer to that as like a spirit animal or totem. Those are different things, but I'll use the term power animal, which is an animal spirit or animal spirits that you work with. You'll have other helping spirits such as, ancestral helping spirits. You may work with deities depending on your shamanic path. You may work with gods and goddesses or other spiritual beings. You might work with nature spirits. You might work with elemental spirits. There's the variety of spirits in all of the realms is for all intents and purposes infinite. Even nature spirits come in so many different forms. I don't think they could ever be completely cataloged if somebody tried. Be interesting. I wonder if there's like there's probably an encyclopedic book somewhere of a catalog of nature spirits. I've compiled a list of something like 200 names for nature spirits from different cultures, everything from fairies to leprechauns to contemple to menehune to what have you. So an endless variety. So those are the three components. So let me get back to the first one, which is an altered state of consciousness. We can also call that the shamanic state of consciousness because it is special and unique. And so what's special and unique about it? Well, I would have to go into like, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'd have to go into some brainwave science here. But there's a particular pattern of brainwaves called theta, and those become predominant. That's one indicator. And then, from the EEG research and other research, they've shown that the shamanic state of consciousness, certain parts of the brain become more active, other parts become less active. The brain starts to coordinate in different ways. So it changes the way that it sort of rewires the brain temporarily. So how do shamans alter their consciousness? Well, there are many, many different ways. So a lot of people may think of what we would call plant medicine. So plant medicine are entheogen or hallucinogen or psychedelic substances. In this case, natural substances. If you're talking about a shamanic culture, they're going to be using something like peyote, psilocybin, which I realize isn't a plant, but a mushroom. Plants and fungi are different kingdoms of living beings. Or ayahuasca is a big one that everybody seems to be trying these days. There are others. There are lots of others. Some of them are rather hidden. Some of them are there's some that like peyote, psilocybin, blah, 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 ayahuasca, all that stuff, basically illegal in the US, except under very specific conditions and in many places in the world, basically illegal to use. But there are other legal forms of entheogens. One would be, well, I don't know how entheogenic it is, but one is like blue lotus flowers from Egypt. They used to use those in spiritual ceremony there. I mean, they don't just grow them in Egypt anymore, but they would infuse alcohol with blue lotus flower, which has a couple of psychedelic chemicals in it. So anyway, plant medicine, one way to do that. Look at my hair. What's going on there? Plant medicine is one way to enter into an altered state of consciousness. And like I said, the shamanic state of consciousness, the closest thing that they have observed in EEG research is somebody who is on psilocybin or magic mushrooms. So the other aspects, the other ways include things like rhythm. So drumming is really common. I use drumming when I work with clients. Drumming, rattling, so use of rhythm. And what happens, and this is really cool because people have been doing this for thousands and thousands of years without knowing the science behind it, without having EEGs or anything, is that the brain will, what we call entrain itself to certain rhythms. So the shamanic drum rhythm, which is common across cultures, is beating at a rate that we would call theta. And remember, I said that theta was the predominant brainwave state in the shamanic state of consciousness. So these are slower brainwaves than are normal, even slower than if you're sort of daydreaming or in a very light trance. Theta seems to open up intuition and imagination and visualization and all of those things. So, and you can find, you can go on YouTube or whatever and find brainwave entrainment music that will entrain you to theta. That doesn't mean you're journeying. It just means that your brain is entering into a theta state. If you listen to it, you will notice a qualitative change in your state of consciousness. So those are a couple ways. Another couple ways, people will do dancing. I've done shamanic dancing, for very long periods of time. We'll say hours on end. It's not the quickest way. It's definitely not the fastest way to get into the shamanic state of consciousness, but it's very effective. It works. There are cultures, I'm thinking tribal cultures in Africa, for example, they will dance like all night long into exhaustion. No food or water, whatever, until their body basically collapses in order to achieve a spiritual state of consciousness. So sometimes there's ordeal. There are Native American cultures that do these like all night, that do all night dances as well. You can imagine doing the same body movements for 8, 10, 12 hours in a row with no breaks and no water, no food. It will definitely shift your consciousness. Rhythm is really good at inducing trance. It's why music is so popular, right? Because rhythm can change our consciousness really quickly. Listen to a sad song, we feel sad. Listen to an upbeat dance song, and we find ourselves moving to the music, right? It changes our state of consciousness. So this shamanic state of consciousness can be achieved through rhythm, through dance, through fasting, vision quests. So there's all kinds of ways. I prefer rhythm. For me, it's reliable. I have full control over the journey. Unlike if you take psilocybin or ayahuasca or something, you are on that trip. If you have a bad trip, oh well, it's a bad trip. You can't stop. You are not in control. Maybe that's okay, but this is why I prefer rhythm for journeying. So you can use drums, rattles, bells, click sticks, didgeridoo, anything that can create sound, a rhythmic sound, usually droning the same rhythm over and over again. It's not meant to be interesting like a piece of classical music with lots of tempo changes and you know uh, key changes and all of that sort of thing. It's not meant to do that. It's meant to bring you into a state of consciousness and help you stay there. So let's talk about different realms, different spiritual realms, different spiritual worlds. In most shamanic cultures, they recognize at least 3 shamanic worlds. I actually think there are basically an infinite number of worlds, but there are 3 main ones that we journey to. There is what we call the lower world, the upper world, and the middle world. Let's start with the lower world. The lower world is not the underworld. It is not hell. It is not a realm of death and decay and stagnation. It is a world of natural beauty that we achieve when shamans get there. They do get there by entering into the earth, by going down into the earth below where we are standing or sitting at the moment. This to me is a little bit metaphoric. Like the actual travel part is metaphoric. What you are doing is you are tuning part of your consciousness. Part of your consciousness will stay in the room. So if a fire breaks out and the fire alarm goes off, you'll be able to respond to that. But the vast majority of your consciousness is getting tuned to another frequency. That's the best way I can describe it. And I realize that can be sort of a new agey kind of description of things, but it's like you have a radio in your car, and in your car is every radio signal from every radio broadcast on the planet, and even the ones that are off the planet, right? Satellites and the space station and who knows, aliens. And so being able to tune that radio just means you're tuning to a very specific frequency. It doesn't change that those signals still exist in the same space. And that's sort of what it's like with spiritual realms. It's just we live in this reality. We live in this 3D reality. And there are layers above and below that we can tune our consciousness to. We can experience different realities. And then we can return and experience our reality. So the lower world is a place of natural beauty. It is full of animal spirits. Particularly, this is where we go to meet our power animals. You might meet your ancestors there. You might meet other beings there. Are these worlds real, like physical reality, or are they made up? So reality is a really twisty kind of thing to think about it, because I think even like all reality is subjective, even this 3D reality. Like you're watching me and having some experience of me, but are you really? What you're experiencing is, light waves bouncing in your retinas and causing electrical signals to your brain, and your consciousness creates a picture of a dude sitting in front of you, and wavy air hits your eardrums that creates an electrical signal to your brain, and your consciousness interprets that as um as me speaking or whatever. Your consciousness is a real miracle. Your consciousness is amazing. Everything you're experiencing is happening inside your consciousness. Now, we might have consensus. We might agree that I said the word shaman. We might agree that, right? And that's one way in this culture that we say things are real, if multiple people agree on it. So, personally, I have journeyed to the lower world and met other shamans there who were journeying at the same time, and were able to map out and draw distinctive features in the landscape, structures and landmarks and all kinds of stuff. We had the same map, even though we didn't communicate it ahead of time. So, and there are projects for mapping out. There are people who are working on mapping out parts of the lower world. This is, to me, a consensus reality. When people journey to the upper world, they tend to experience many of the same things. So to me, it is as real as this 3D reality. It has less form to it, less substance, less weight, less mass, but it's still it is a reality of which there are an infinite amount of realities. It's just one, but it's as real as this one because it happens. I experience it through the same subjective processes that I experience an image of me on the screen, or me in the mirror, or talking to another person. So that's, so lower world. Oh, this is a great question. How does astral projection compare to shamanic journeying? Is that a type of tuning your radio as well, or is it more different than that? Astral projection and shamanic journeying are very much the same in that aspect, in that you are separating part of your consciousness and you can travel around. Most astral projection is what we would consider a middle world journey. Shamanically, the middle world is the world we live in, but the spiritual overlay to that. So if I journey in the middle world, I can go to London or France or whatever. You can do the same thing when you astrally project. The difference is that when I do middle world journeys, I am working with helping spirits, and people are astrally projecting tend not to do that. It makes it a little riskier. The middle world is not without its. The lower world and upper world are, completely beneficent, but there are lots of spiritual beings in the middle world, and some of them are not so friendly or suffering, or don't want you to intrude on their space. And so, and so, yeah, it is a very, very similar process. Um, I have had clients. I remember back a few years back having a young woman whose mother contacted me, and I worked with her. She'd been doing an awful lot of astral projection, and in normal waking life was experiencing a lot of dissociation. So she didn't have the. So in shamanic journeying, this can be the same in astral projection as well. There's a protocol for returning when you're done with your journey, right? So that you don't leave parts of yourself behind, and you don't get into strong dissociation after a journey. And this young woman had been, she was like 15 or 16 and had been, taken an online course and read some books and stuff and was doing all kinds of astral journeying. And I think, her reality at that time, as it is for many teenagers, was pretty painful. So she was trying to escape reality and was getting very dissociated. The more and more she did it, the more dissociated she became. She was leaving parts of herself behind and didn't have a good sort of return protocol. It's something I teach when I teach my students journeying. Very strongly explain how to return properly and why it's so important, and what to do if you get interrupted in the middle of your journey and you have to return without following the protocol. So, I've had it happen where I've been journeying, sitting here, and my front door is over there, and UPS guy comes and pounds on my door. What do I do? Well, I have to like get up and go over and take care of that. But then there's a protocol that I have to get back to ensure that I have not caused myself what we call soul loss, left parts of myself behind. So astral projection is very similar. I don't know the EEG research on astral projection, and I don't know that it's exactly the same state of consciousness, but it is a form of soul travel. So I experienced, as a child, on many occasions sort of spontaneous astral projection. I would find myself outside of my body pretty frequently, but I also had, I had a lot of dissociation back then. I don't really experience that these days. I think my shamanic training has really helped out with that. So, so I talked about the lower world, and I talked a little bit about the middle world. So again, the middle world is this world, right? But it's the spiritual overlay to that. So if you journey in the middle world, you will encounter the people that are here, and the buildings and the roads and the countries and all of that sort of thing. And you can do a middle world journey to the moon, and you can, there's all kinds of cool things you can do in the middle world. But there are beings in the middle world. There's lots of beings. It's crowded, as a matter of fact. I had this conversation, I don't know, a couple of years ago. I guess I was interviewed by some paranormal researchers on a radio show out of Pittsburgh, and we were talking about a lot of paranormal encounters that I've had, which I think are most of which I think are funny, actually. And they got kind of freaked out by one of the stories I told, and I'm like, how are you freaked out by this? Like, you guys are going out there and looking for this stuff, you're seeking it out, and it's freaking you out. I don't get that. But one of the women who was part of this paranormal group was a medium who can very clairvoyant, who could see spirit. And I said to her, I'm like, look, you can see spirit. Tell these guys it's crowded. Like, you're surrounded by spirits all the time. And she's like, oh yeah, all the time, all over the place, everywhere you go. It's like Grand Central Station at rush hour with spirits everywhere. We're not tuned into it most of the time. So in the middle world, there are lots and lots of spirits. This is where we can encounter nature spirits pretty frequently. Before I ever learned anything about shamanism, I had several encounters with nature spirits that were seen with these eyes by other people besides myself. One of the first ones I remember, I had lots of experiences as a child, but as an adult, one of the first ones I remember, I was with a group of people. We were hiking in the hiking in the desert at night because we couldn't. It was 120 during the day, so we couldn't hike during the day. So we were hiking at night, and it was cool, and it was just amazing because there were no city lights for 100 whatever miles away. You could see, like, the moon was out. You could see your shadow on the ground from the moon, which if you live in a city, you can't ever really do. and the stars were amazing and all this stuff. And somebody said, look up on the ridge. And we looked up on the ridge, and all of us saw these beings that were dancing on the ridge. They couldn't have been human because they were, at least 10 or 15 feet tall. And we all saw them, and we saw lots of things. And we were not doing drugs, I promise. So that was one experience. Another experience I had that I thought was really funny, and still think is really funny. I was training in jiu-jitsu, Japanese martial art, in Boston, and I was down. My dojo was in the basement of this building, and there were multiple rooms. There's the main training room, and I was in there just with one other guy, and we were working out. We were training together, and I see this little, like, 2-foot tall, what looked like a middle-aged pudgy man in old clothes, like looked like 18th century kind of thing, but he had a greenish color to him, and he had a bowler hat, but it was green, and he, almost like stereotype of what you would think a leprechaun would look like. And he ran through the room right past us and through the back wall, which was of the ground because we were in the basement. But he ran through the back wall, and I was like, did I just hallucinate that? And my friend that I was training with, his name is Jimmy. Jimmy said, did you just see that? And I'm like, well, what did you see? He's like, that little guy that just ran through the room. I was like, yeah, I thought I was hallucinating. And my teacher, who had been in another room, but could see down the hallway, came in and said, what happened to your little friend that just ran through here? So 3 of us, one of whom was not in the same room with us, all saw the same being. I have since learned that that was a nature, what we call a nature spirit, or a fairy, or fae, or a leprechaun, or whatever name you want to apply to it. But really interesting stuff. So we encounter these beings in the middle world. There are, again, the middle world is sort of a really generic term. It's sort of like saying the United States, right? I live in the US, which is true story. But if you go to California and look for me, unless I'm traveling, you're not going to find me, right? I don't live in that part of the United States. So the middle world is a big range of frequencies. It's sort of like we have radio frequency. That is a part of the band on the electromagnetic spectrum. It's a great way of thinking about spiritual realities, okay? So we've got radio frequency, we've got X-rays, we've got visible light spectrum, we've got all kinds of stuff that falls on that electromagnetic spectrum. So to say that something is electromagnetic, okay, it might be true, but is it a radio signal? Is it light? Is it something else? So this middle world, anyway, lots of reasons to journey in the middle world. You might want to commune with a nature spirit. You might want to speak to a lake, for example, or ensure the safety of your home by communicating with the spirits of place that live in your home. If you have a home, there are spirits there. There are spirits that live there. Having a harmonious relationship with them is a good idea. Then there is what we call the upper world. So we get there by going up. This, to most people, very much appears like what we see on TV or in cartoons or whatever when they describe heaven. It's, it can be cloudy, misty, whatever. And we encounter spirits there often that are deities from different cultures, or angels, archangels, ancestors sometimes hang out there, deceased humans that have returned to become helping spirits that may not be our ancestors. I've had a student whose main upper world helping spirit was Einstein, right? So anybody who's deceased can come back as a helping spirit. I'll do a whole episode on helping spirits at some point in the future. just because it's a complex topic. But and so there's different things that we might do in the upper world, and different things that we might do in the lower world, and different things that we do in the middle world. So middle world journeying, I'm not great at doing this aspect of it, but is what a traditional thing that shamans might do would be to locate lost objects, and that is a middle world type of journey. Some certain types of healing are done in the middle world, that sort of thing. So that is shamanic journeying in a nutshell. My personal belief is that anybody, nearly anybody, can learn how to journey successfully, can learn how to do a shamanic journey successfully. Over the years of teaching that I've been teaching, I've worked with many students. In the beginning, some students were not successful at trying to journey. Oh, I didn't go anywhere, or this happened, or that happened, or I can't picture things. I've honed my teaching method with input from lots of other teachers, and knock on wood, since I have been teaching this using this methodology, I have been 100% successful with teaching students how to journey. So I think that it is an inborn ability that we have to do this. I will say that everybody's journey is different. Everybody's journeys are completely different, just as your experience of this waking reality is completely different than everyone else on Earth's. We all live in our own little reality tunnel, to use a phrase coined by the author's name is escaping me at this point, but not that important. We live in our own little reality tunnels, and what we don't realize is how much our reality tunnels actually don't overlap with anybody else's reality tunnels. We think what we're experiencing is objective. It is not. Everything you experience, 100% of what you experience is subjective reality. You cannot step out of subjective reality. We can have things that are very consistent in our 3D world, right? This cup, last time I picked it up, had coffee. This time I pick it up, has coffee. I'm going to drink it. Still coffee. That's consistent. We might say that that's objective. But my experience of this being coffee is my experience of this being coffee. You can hypnotize somebody. And convince them. I've seen this demonstrated where they would hypnotize somebody and touch their arm with an unlit matchstick. Right. So a match, but it's not lit. It's not hot. Nothing. Touch it and say, I'm burning your arm right here with this match, and touch it, and a blister will form right there. Right? Their subjective reality is taking physical form on their body. And we also know that observation of things changes their physical principles, right? So the double slit experiment is a good one. You can look it up if you don't know what that is, but it basically passing light through a couple of slits, and it acts like a wave until you put a particle detector in front of it, and then it acts like particles. How does the light know that you are expecting it to be a particle or a wave? Consciousness. We are living in a subjective, 100% subjective world. Once we get a real grasp of that, you can start to make changes in your world, but you have to master your consciousness. Shamanic training is one way to do it. There's lots of different ways of training. This is basically what magic is, right? Magic, not stage magic, but magic like ceremonial magic or manifestation or that sort of thing, is changing our conscious perception until our subjective reality produces what we want in a consistent way. Right. So all reality is subjective. So anyway, getting back to learning how to journey, um, I've been really successful. Like I said, everybody's journey is different. Um, some people have a, I don't want to call it a condition. Um, I don't really have another great word for it, but some people have something called aphantasia. Aphantasia means you can't make pictures in your head, or you can't see pictures in your head. You're actually making them. You're just not consciously aware of them. If you have aphantasia, it's a disconnect between different parts of your brain, the parts of your brain that make pictures and the parts of your brain that perceive those pictures consciously. But you are making pictures unconsciously all the time. Can you still journey if you can't visualize? And the answer to that is yes. I know this because I have a good friend who has aphantasia, who is able to journey. She uses other senses. She knew her power animal was a horse because she could smell, feel, and hear a horse when she journeys. So she uses other senses. One can use pure intention to journey as well, as long as you're going in the right state of consciousness. And a lot of people, um, like a lot of people have misconceptions about or expectations about what journeying is going to be like. And when they're not met, they're like, oh, I failed because this journey isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. But that's life, right? I go to the store looking for frozen peas and they're all out, but I get frozen carrots instead. I don't like frozen carrots. I wouldn't get frozen carrots. Frozen corn. I get frozen corn instead. Did I fail? Well, I didn't get the frozen peas, but I got frozen vegetables, and maybe that meets my needs, right? It's not failure. It's just different. It's just we didn't necessarily meet our exact expectations. Um, the other thing that stumbles people in journeying as well is journeying is very active. Your brain is incredibly active, and people mistake it for meditation. And so they think like when if I were to start drumming for them, like all of a sudden they're going to go on a journey, and spirit's going to take them somewhere. That can happen, but that's not usual. Usually you have to actively kick it off. Imagine you are here. Now imagine you are here now. And at a certain point, your direction of the journey, there's a subtle shift between you are no longer completely controlling the journey experience and have surrendered to spirit, but you have to get there. Yeah, so that can absolutely, yes. Yeah, so this person I know that has aphantasia, it's also from CPTSD. So yeah, sometimes we shut PTSD. So I am a person diagnosed with PTSD, or what we would call CPTSD. Um, Most people just call it PTSD because CPTSD hasn't been added to the DSM yet, but it's fairly distinct. Um, but it does create what I would consider brain damage in that it disconnects parts of the brain. Those can be worked through. So as you have done work, your aphantasia has kind of gone away. There's another practice that you can do for aphantasia, and it's really great. I got this from, I read an article that somebody had written who had aphantasia but was a photographer, and of course, aphantasia would hinder his ability to do what he wanted because he couldn't make pictures of, before he went on a shoot, he couldn't picture in his mind what he wanted. So he would have to get there. He could make beautiful photographs because obviously he's seeing through, his experience at that time, but he couldn't picture what he wanted. So there's an exercise. It takes time, but it will actually increase your, I'm going to give this to you today as an exercise. And it's good for everybody. You don't have to have aphantasia for this to increase your visualization ability. And I can't remember who came up with this exercise, but I read about it. The person I read about it from did not invent this exercise, but it was invented by somebody who's trying to like increase intelligence and increase visualization ability, and it works, and it's great. So what you do is you close your eyes and you describe out loud. It has to be out loud, whatever it is that you see. And you might be thinking, well, I have aphantasia, I'm not seeing anything. Well, not necessarily true, right? You're going to see, you might see, oh, I see a shadow behind my eyes. The color is sort of a brownish black. There's some swirling lights there, right? You describe it out loud, what you're seeing with your eyes closed. In the exercise, the best way to do this is to describe it to another person. That seems to be an important component. Barring that, you could describe it to into a recorder, like a digital recorder or your phone, or record it on your computer or something. Not that you have to listen to it again. It's the idea, the concept that somebody is listening or you're being recorded or whatever, that makes a stronger connection. And translating what you're seeing into words creates a stronger neural pathway between your between the conscious and unconscious parts of your brain, between the visualization centers in the back of your brain, with your prefrontal cortex. And over time, because of neuroplasticity, this will help correct aphantasia. This photographer was able to start visualizing things and plan his photo shoots out better. If you are not if you don't have aphantasia, it would increase your ability to visualize, which is incredibly useful for all kinds of work. Yeah, give it a shot. Let me know how it works for you. It takes time. Like, you have to do this, you do it for like 10 or 20 minutes at a time every day for weeks, and you'll start to see differences. It is not an immediate effect kind of thing, but it does work in my experience and from others' experience. I have not had aphantasia, but I have used this exercise to increase my ability to visualize, to make strong visuals. I get incredibly strong, sometimes overwhelming visuals when I journey. It's sort of like, I have never taken LSD, but it is sort of like how somebody described taking LSD to me one time. It's like all of the colors are like popping out at me, that kind of thing when I journey. So, well, anyway, folks, I've been talking for just about an hour. I'm going to wrap for the day. It's Friday. I hope you all have a lovely weekend. I hope this has been helpful. If you're interested at all in shamanism, I've got lots and lots of material on all of my channels. Check out my website. Lots of material there. In the beginning of my YouTube channel, I did a lot of stuff on shamanism. But I also have a lot of articles on my website as well if you're interested in reading stuff, if you want to learn more about shamanism. If you want to learn shamanism, it doesn't have to be me, but I suggest reaching out to a teacher. I'm not a huge fan of pre-recorded classes on journeying in particular. You can do them, but I think it's best to learn how to journey with a teacher. Then you can go off and do other things, read books about journeying and read, expand your horizons and that sort of thing. But to get the basics down, it's really, really helpful to have a teacher. So with that, I will leave you for today. My love to all of you. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Let me end here.